Hey, y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders sometime this week. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
Man, I have to say, it is a gorgeous day. We have been enjoying the sunshine. I can't get enough of it. I'm ready for spring. Hopefully, we've turned a corner, even though that damn little rodent lied and said we had 6 more weeks of winter. Fuck Phil. No more winter for me. I'm done.
I don't think Phil's up on the current weather models, and he's wrong a lot. I don't pay that rodent any attention, that ground squirrel.
Who does that rodent even think he is?
He's a leftover from the past. It's time to move on. Damn, was it Poxitani Phil? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, damn him.
Damn him. Damn that Phil. All right, Dylan, before we get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to a few of our listeners who have sent us some really awesome messages over the past few days. First, I want to give a shout out to Kendra up in Greencastle, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Yeah, she says she loves the podcast. It's one of her favorites of all times to listen to, and that she only found us about a year ago. She's never laughed more, and she loves our sense of humor.
That's so awesome.
So let me just say, when I got this message from Kendra, it really made my day. And we got the sweetest email from Nancy, and she's amazing. Really appreciate the awesome email, Nancy. I want you to keep trucking, girl.
Keep on going. Keep on getting it.
Keep on keeping on, y'all.
That's right.
So yeah, it's always great to hear from our listeners. And a little housekeeping, you can always send us an email at mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. Usually try to answer those within a day or so. And Dylan, we have our website, mountainmurderspodcast.com. It is a one-stop for Mountain Murders. Not only can you listen to the podcast directly from the website, but there's also access to our shop where you can pick up some Mountain Murders merch.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and we've got a couple things we're working on. We'll be adding to the website, maybe some video. I know we've been promising that for a minute, but I think we finally got our shit together. We'll be able to get some video out for you guys. Gonna get it on YouTube. Gonna make it happen, right, Dylan?
Yeah, yes. It's very exciting times here in the studio.
And if you've ever thought about joining Patreon, we have a sweetheart deal happening through the end of the month. If you join Patreon, you will get, and you sign up for the annual membership, you'll get 15% off between now and the end of February, which is the 28th. Code word, the little deal that you want to get is sweetheart. Because
Oh,
again, it's a sweetheart deal.
you can get it for your loved one.
Yes, exactly. Your wife loves true crime. Get her a Mountain Murders Patreon subscription.
Or maybe your husband does.
Maybe your husband does.
Or maybe it's your partner.
Maybe your cat.
Or maybe it's that weird person down the street you're trying to make inroads with.
Maybe your cat's birthday is coming up and you're celebrating your cat's quinceañera and you want to get her a great gift. She loves true crime. You guys listen to true crime together. Mountain Murders.
Okay.
Make it happen.
So that's just to say Mountain Murders is for literally everyone. Everything.
Get cats, hats, rats, bats.
Yeah, and
We don't discriminate.
after all these years, all these many, many years, and one listener pointed out, this podcast literally travels the entire scope of our relationship and marriage.
It does.
Say for just a couple of months, literally, which is kind of cool to think about, you know?
You've been on this journey with us, whether you want to or not.
Yeah. But no, even after all these years later, it's still so amazing when someone says, "You're my favorite podcast. I love you guys. You know, I listen all the time, you know, and just the warrant you got me through some tough times, blah, 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 when I really needed a laugh," things like that. It still just warms our hearts.
It does. It really keeps us going. You know,
does.
because I mean, you know, it's like anything. After a minute, we have days when we maybe burn out a little bit. We have other stuff going on. The last thing we want to do, we don't feel good, whatever. The last thing we want to do is like sit down and record.
It's tough sometimes. It really, and I'm sure the listeners can tell sometimes we're maybe not on our A game or a bit off, but we're still trucking through it, but we still really do have that love for it and that excitement. And we're looking to so many new things in the future.
Well, yeah, when we have good feedback from folks that lets us know that, you know, we're not doing this in vain. And we should keep going, Dylan.
Yes.
All right. I thought we would mix things up a little bit with this sometime this week. This midweek, sometime this week episode.
I think this is a great topic. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I thought we could skip our recap of crime news this week and discuss some jobs that were held by serial killers. As we all know, serial killers often lead a double life, and many of them worked, quote unquote, normal jobs.
Well, they have to. They got to keep the lights on while they're out hunting people.
But before we get into this, I found an interesting article at neurosciencenews.com, Dylan, and it's titled The Preferred Jobs of Serial Killers and Psychopaths. And basically, researchers are investigating why people with psychopathic traits and those who engage in acts of mass killing tend to gravitate towards certain careers. Like, for example, the Golden State Killer. We know him as Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer. He was a rapist and murderer in the California area. He was a police officer.
Oh.
So many are, want to know, how does somebody with such sadistic brutality go through and make it into law enforcement?
Yeah,
like
I know.
This, who has got this sadistic personality and is capable of such brutality, and somehow they are able to pass psychological exams and be hired as a law enforcement officer.
It's really scary to think about.
Yeah. And, it seems like some of these folks tend to gravitate toward being a police officer, a security official, military personnel, or a religious official. And I mean, obviously not everyone occupying these jobs is a serial killer, nor are they likely to become one, but there's something about these jobs that is inherently appealing to offenders.
Do you think it's maybe those are typically like positions of authority and power, maybe?
You gain trust.
Yeah.
In those positions. I mean, just for example, religious official. When we hear these stories of religious officials, whether it's, the Catholic Church or a non-denominational Christian church or whatever, we hear these cases of pedophiles hiding under the guise of, or the cloak of the church. And we ask, like, how? Why? I think sometimes we forget, maybe it's because the person went into this position because they knew they would have access.
But yeah, I think that's obvious.
And they would have trust and access. And so it's not so much about this position is making this person do this thing. It's that these people gravitate toward that job because they know that they can get away with it.
And also it's like the last person you would think is doing these horrible things, right?
Right. So here's a serial killer job breakdown, according to Neuroscience News. So as I mentioned, those were the top 3 professional government serial killer occupations. Again, that was police or security, military, and religious official. And we've seen this time and time again. How many serial killers have joined the military?
A lot.
And most of the time can't hack it and end up being kicked out. But so many gravitate toward the military.
Well, they give it a shot, and then, of course, I don't think they can handle the rules, the structure, and all that, They like to be in control.
Yeah. Top 3 unskilled serial killer occupations is a general laborer, meaning like maybe a mover, a landscaper, a hotel porter, and a gas station attendant.
Okay.
Top 3 semi-skilled serial killer occupations, forestry worker or an arborist. Number 2 is a truck driver, and number 3 is a warehouse manager.
That's a bit odd.
And then the top 3 skilled serial killer occupations. Number 1 is an aircraft machinist or assembler. The second is a shoemaker or repair person. And 3 is an automobile upholsterer.
And now, are these jobs are they breaking down all the serial killers we've ever known of, taking their occupation, and is that what they're using to create these lists?
Yeah, I think what they're doing is looking at these occupations, even maybe through like a bygone era in terms of available jobs. And since a lot of the active serial killers that we know are around in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and some of these jobs are now kind of largely obsolete, but they're kind of looking back over the years and being able to kind of pull like what these, I guess these jobs that were available at that time.
Well, yeah, that explains like a automobile upholsterer, or not saying that you can't go to a trim shop and get your car, worked on now, but or a shoemaker. I mean, there's not a
There was a serial killer, Joseph Callinger, I think. in Pennsylvania was a shoe guy, a shoe repairman.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking of serial killers that come to mind when we talking about these jobs. And interestingly enough, Dylan, it mentioned truck driver, and I've been listening to an audiobook by Frank Figliuzzi called Long Haul. It's hunting the highway serial killers. I am almost finished with this book. I'm on like chapter 21 of 26. So I'm about finished with this book, and I have to say it's really interesting. There is a task force that was created by the FBI, the Highway Serial Killer Task Force, and they've been able to pinpoint many unsolved murders along our major highways and how they're being committed by truck drivers.
Well, look, it's the perfect cover for a serial killer, right? I mean, you're transient, you're going all over the place, you're never in one place for a very long time. You got a big truck, trailer, you could hide things in it, transport them to other places. It's kind of hard to remember. I mean, you see hundreds of semis a day if you go out, if you're out on the road. So unless it's a very specific looking tractor or something like that, color wise or real customized, you're not going to remember it. So I mean, it's really truly the perfect occupation for a serial killer if you think about it.
And this is really interesting, Dylan. While not all psychopaths are serial killers, psychopathy, or at least the possession of psychopathic traits, is a pretty common denominator among serial killers, sex offenders, and the most violent criminals out there. So according to Oxford University, I have the top 10 occupations that attract psychopaths. Can you guess what the number one is?
The CEO
Yes.
of a multinational company.
CEO or business executive.
Yeah.
Number two is a lawyer.
Now, we've talked about this before, and when you make these big, broad decisions that affect, sometimes thousands of people or entire communities, I think you can't be the most, you can't have your feels in it, right? You got to be able to detach your feelings from that situation and your emotions, and you cannot be a very empathetic person, or I don't think you could live with some of these decisions.
Hey, we've seen Succession. We know how it works.
Yeah.
So second is lawyer. Does that surprise anybody?
No, I mean, not really.
Number three is media personality. Doesn't super surprise me either.
No, the fact that they can, kind of get all in people's businesses at some of the most sensitive times of their lives. And, they'll say, oh, it's just in the name of journalism, but you're kind of being a dick. I was thinking the other day about.
Well, even with media personality, that can mean like maybe an actor, actress. And if you think about it, some of those folks seem like they might be psychopaths.
It's true.
I know one thing that's coming to mind, and I don't want anybody to come for me, but I've been listening to a podcast about the Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Justin Baldoni situation, the lawsuits, the back and forth.
That sounds like a really weird situation.
And the information that's been uncovered points to the fact that maybe Ryan Reynolds, funny guy, is not a good person and has orchestrated some shit behind the scenes. And I'm like, bro, might be a psychopath.
Okay.
Yeah. Like initially when I read the lawsuit, I was like, oh, this is terrible. No one should be subjected to this while they're working, blah, blah, blah. But as time has gone on and listening to this podcast that's uncovered a lot of information, my opinion has changed a little bit. So things are not always as they seem, Dylan.
Well, and that would be a psycho, what is it? How do you say it?
Psychopath?
A psychopathic
trait.
Trait.
Psychopathic
Yeah.
trait? Okay.
Well, yeah, that.
Uh-huh.
To be able to lead two different lives or have two completely different personas, right?
Yeah.
To have one you present to the public, right? Just all shucks, funny, whatever, non-threatening, but then behind the scenes be ruthless and doing some dirty shit.
Yeah, well, totally true. Number 4 is the salesperson. Number 5 is a surgeon, which is scary. Number 6 is a journalist or news anchor, which, I mean, come on, that fits in with like a media personality. Number 7 is a police officer. Then we have religious official, chef, and civil servants, meaning like military, city council, maybe a correctional officer.
Okay. Do all those make sense to you?
They do.
Yeah, I think so.
And I've worked in a kitchen under many a chef over the course of my lifetime, and I have to say, yeah, I think most of them are psychopaths.
Or are they just assholes?
They don't care to like throw a knife or a can of something at your face, at your head. Yeah. I mean, look at Gordon Ramsay. Love him, but the guy's not, he's probably kind of psycho. Don't
He's
you think?
mean, bro. About, yeah, big boy. Yeah.
You're
yeah.
offended by that.
Well,
Because you don't want to go in Gordon Ramsay's, you don't want to go to Hell's Kitchen and be called a fat boy, do you?
well, I'd like to think that I've trimmed down a little bit and maybe I wouldn't be the big boy in the room, but just watching the looks on these people's faces when he says some of the stuff he says, it's very hurtful to them. And it's kind of, I mean, I don't know. That's really mean.
You scabby bitch, get over here.
Oh, this is pure shit.
Yes.
Yeah, anyway.
Still watch.
No, I love Gordon.
Okay, so let's get into some jobs that were held by serial killers. Again, they're pretending to live normal lives, doing like this double life kind of thing. And you know who really pops into my mind, first and foremost, Dylan, is Dennis Rader.
Yeah.
Now, Dennis Rader was employed as an ADT security alarm installer from 1974 to 1988 in the Wichita area. His community viewed him as a leader. He was active in local church and Cub Scouts program. He even had children and raised a family during this time, which was also the period in which he started his killing spree. From 1974 to 1991, Rader killed at least 10 people who he usually targeted from visiting their homes while installing alarms. When he paused his killing spree, police still had no leads, so they wanted to bait the murderer. And their efforts worked. It angered Rader that someone else could possibly receive the credit for his killings, so he sent a floppy disk proving they had been misled. Police quickly connected the disc to his church and found it came from someone named Dennis. In 2005, Rader was arrested and later found guilty on 10 counts of murder. He received 10 consecutive life sentences and is currently in prison. His earliest release day is set to be 2180.
Oh, God. They better not ever let that monster out.
That man will never see the light of day.
Because he's got to be on up in the years now, right?
Yes.
He is a monster. He's very scary. How meticulously he would plan,
Calculating.
and think about these what he wanted to do to his victims, and the fact that he was familiar with the home security systems inside and out. It's just, but it's his own ego, his own hubris that brought him down, and he really thought he was smarter than everybody.
He did.
And he wasn't. He even asked them something to the effect of,
Can you trace this?
"Can you trace this?" Something like a fly. They're like, "Oh no, for sure we can't."
Dumbass, we can't.
Of course, there was metadata that showed him exactly where it was coming from.
All right, Dylan, have you heard of or are you familiar with Philip Markoff?
Maybe just a little bit.
Well, he was a medical student at the State University of New York at Albany, pursuing a career toward becoming a doctor. On April 13th of 2009, Markoff responded to a Craigslist ad from Julissa Brisman, a masseuse and aspiring model. The scene where Brisman was found after meeting with Markoff seemed to be a robbery gone wrong, and she was left severely injured and died about a week later in the hospital. He planned and carried out 2 other violent attacks through Craigslist until his digital footprint finally caught up with him. Police were able to track him through messages from email providers and IP addresses. When police searched his apartment, they found bullets, cash, plastic, like zip ties, women's underwear, and a hard drive containing the messages from Craigslist. Markoff pleaded guilty to Brisman's murder within 48 hours of being taken to jail and was put on a suicide watch. But in August of 2010, he committed suicide in jail. So he's known as like the Craigslist killer.
I was going to say.
You remember him?
I remember him as the Craigslist killer.
I remember that story being in the news and how scary. I mean, because Craigslist was pretty popular.
Right.
Just for classifieds, but then to think someone's preying upon, I mean, I know this woman was offering up masseuse or sex services, which I think Craigslist doesn't do that anymore.
Well, they don't openly do it.
Right. Just like Backpage, they got rid of all that. But just the thought that somebody could be trolling classifieds and then kill you is kind of scary.
Well, look, I would be worried to even just like meeting people off Facebook Marketplace. Just any of that, it kind of weirds me out. I mean, it really does. And I know
you're just trying to go get a lamp, and then next
a lamp
thing you
for
know,
$10.
someone's trying to stab you.
But that's been used for many other kinds of crimes like robbery and things like that. But it's just the randomness of it. And then you're agreeing to meet someone. And I know 10,000 times it's going to be normal. But it's always in the back of my mind about what's this person like? Are they okay?
Yes.
So, yeah, that's very kind of creepy to me.
All right. We are familiar with Dean Corll, known as the Candy Man, and he earned that nickname because he actually owned a candy factory.
Oh, wow.
Dean Corll was known to pass out candies to local children from the candy factory his family owned, but between 1970 and 1973, he would torture and kill boys and young men inside his various rental houses and apartments around Houston. Corll recruited the help of Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. and David Owen Brooks to lure these victims into their van with the promises of rides and parties. Their killing spree ended in 1973 only because Henley shot Corll during the attempted sexual assault of a victim. When police arrived to the scene, the 17-year-old Henley confessed to the 28 murders, 6 of which he committed, and led them to remains. Henley was convicted of 6 counts of murder, and his role in the killings, he received 6 consecutive 99-year sentences.
Damn. 28.
But there's another serial killer who has ties to a candy factory, Dylan.
Now, I've got to imagine when this was happening there in the Houston area, this was a big deal.
I'm sure it was.
All these young people disappearing like this. That's a lot.
But I also think at that time, the 70s, you had more transient. You had a lot of hitchhikers, a lot of young people, because, that was just after the moving, grooving 60s when people were on the road,
the
hitchhiking,
summer of love
moving
and all
around.
that.
Yeah. And you weren't so interconnected. So I think maybe a lot of times these missing persons cases weren't really, well, one, they were dismissed as like runaways or whatever. And then 2, they weren't really connected because we didn't have like a database, the internet to kind of connect all of these missing young men.
That's good points.
So speaking of candy, Dylan, Jeffrey Dahmer was a chocolate factory worker.
I knew this.
You can't trust a candy bar. What can you trust?
For one, these stories are making me sad for all the victims and want candy at the same time, which are conflicting feelings.
Jeffrey Dahmer worked the night shift at Ambrosia Chocolate Company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was here where he was arrested by police for a sex crime, only to be let go with a 5-year probation sentence and a year in a work release program in 1989, which we covered pretty extensively during our Jeffrey Dahmer case. He was actually fired in early 1991 because he missed too many shifts. And then he was caught and arrested for murder on July 22nd of 1991. He only served 3 years of his 15 consecutive life sentences before he was murdered in prison.
Damn.
The candy man can, 'cause he mixes it with blood and makes the world taste good.
Is that a song? Did you just make that up?
It's from Willy Wonka.
Oh.
The first Willy Wonka movie.
He mixes it with blood?
Well, that was the part I made up.
Oh. I was like, damn.
I love how I can just tell you, like, yes, that's the song, and you believe me.
Yeah.
You're very gullible, Dylan.
Well, no, I just believe my wife.
You believe everything I say. It's kind of awesome because I lie to you all the time.
Wow. The truth comes out.
H.H. Holmes was a pharmacist and a hotel owner. Before becoming a pharmacist, Holmes was an insurance scammer, which he used as his primary source of income. He then moved to Illinois just before the famous 1893 Chicago World Fair to start his career as a pharmacist. It was also here that he built his, quote, murder hotel, where he would lead victims to rooms that allegedly had peepholes, gas lines, trapdoors, soundproof padded walls, and passageways that led to dead ends. And it has been rumored that he killed up to 200 people in this murder castle.
Damn.
This hotel of death.
Dude.
Motel hell.
Well, could you imagine being trapped in this place built for killing you?
No.
For disposal.
It's like a horror movie.
No, it really is.
It's like being in that horrible film Nothing But Trouble.
Oh, God.
With Dan Aykroyd.
That's a good movie.
This is terrible. It is like a building of death. There's like, what was that? The roller coaster was like the bone grinder.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Dylan. Richard Angelo was a nurse. He was also a volunteer firefighter and an Eagle Scout. As reported by the New York Times, during the time of his 1989 conviction, Angelo claimed he had, quote, planned to inject the patients, then be first on the scene to revive them and be seen as a hero.
Wow.
He's one of those angel of death types.
Yeah.
It was only until a patient complained about Angelo using an unknown drug on him in which he was arrested. County officials near the Long Island hospital where he worked exhumed 33 bodies of patients who had died suspiciously while Angelo worked there. He was a nurse in the intensive care unit for about 6 months. He was convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder and given a sentence of 61 years to life. Those death nurses are very scary.
Yeah, because you're in a very vulnerable position when you're in the hospital or something's happened, and they're the first people you expect to help you. And a lot of times they're the only people around you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, the most recent is the Lucy Letby case in London, or no, I think it's in England, where she's accused of killing newborns.
Yeah.
Very scary. Very scary. Randy Kraft often had 2 jobs at a time. He first entered the U.S. Air Force in 1968, only to be given a general discharge 13 months later after he admitted to military officials that he was gay. He was a dispatcher at Aztec Aircraft Company, teacher's aide for the Long Beach Unified School District, and a computer freelance consultant for companies during the 70s. His past work files showed he tested with an IQ level of 129. When he was later laid off and couldn't find work, he became a bartender at local bars. Kraft was convicted of killing 16 men and sentenced to death in 1989, but it's speculated that between 72 to 83, he killed around 67 men.
Damn.
Are you familiar with Randy Kraft, the
No.
highway killer? Dude, that is a really messed up California serial killer case.
Wow. I'm about to dig into that
Yeah,
one.
you should. I've listened to a couple podcasts. It's not good. Like, this guy's really scary. It's not good.
Damn. What a body count.
Now we are brought to the Russian Andrei Chikatilo.
No, dude. Not the butcher.
Throughout his 12-year killing spree, Chikatilo was married, raised a family, became a grandfather, and was employed in the Soviet Union as a Russian language teacher and office worker. He confessed to killing, sexually assaulting, and cannibalizing girls, boys, and young women. He was convicted in 1992 on 52 counts of murder. He's a literature teacher. So can you imagine your teacher's like, hey, today we're going to read The Adventures of Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer or whatever the book is. Oh, by the way, I'm going to decapitate you, and I might eat your liver with fava beans.
Nah, this guy was a monster, dude.
Yeah.
He really was.
Was he in Siberia?
Yeah, something like
Somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, there's that strange movie. It's like Child 51 or something like that. That's about this guy. People maybe starting to...
I've never seen
You're
it.
starting to get... you have some officials starting to wonder about all the missing kids and things.
No, I've never seen this movie. I'll have to check it out.
I may be wrong on the name, but yes, it's a very strange, gritty movie.
I'll see if I can find it. Bruce MacArthur was a mall Santa.
Oh my God.
He was employed through an event management company as a mall Santa in the greater Toronto area. He pled guilty to murdering 8 men in 2018, leading to conviction without a trial for 25 years without parole. Then we have Thomas Neal Cream.
I'm going to change my last name to Cream.
Now, okay, we got to talk about this guy because he kind of reminds me a little bit of like H.H. Holmes here. In 1872, Cream left behind his wholesale lumber business to study medicine at McGill University in Montreal. He graduated with merits and honors, but coincidentally, the speech given by another speaker at his graduation was about the evils of malpractice in the medical profession. Cream often killed his victims through botched abortions and by prescribing dangerous medicines, so most of his victims were dead within a day. He went on to later brag about his killings and even gave his detective friend a tour of where the murders had taken place. He was arrested and charged for the murders of 4 women, attempted murder for another, and extortion of 2 London physicians. A jury met in 1892, and it took them less than 10 minutes to convict him. He was sentenced to the gallows.
Damn good. That's where you deserve to be.
John Wayne Gacy.
Hey, right quick. I'm sorry. That movie's called Child 44.
Okay.
Yeah, it's worth a watch.
So we've got John Wayne Gacy. We all know him as a children's party clown.
I don't think he was a good clown, man. I really don't understand who was ever getting this clown to come to their kids' birthday parties. Do you agree? I think he was a fucking scary clown.
Well, I would never hire a clown.
Yeah, I know.
I would never hire a clown. That's just, no, not for me. So yeah, I would never.
Dude, I get a happy clown, a happy-go-lucky clown.
I want to get
a
the
silly clown.
I want to get the drunk clown like an Uncle Buck.
No.
And then I can punch him and tell him to go get in his mouse and drive away. Okay. So John Wayne Gacy was also a shoe salesman at one point. He was a construction business founder and a KFC store manager.
Wow.
After serving 18 months in prison for a sex crime of a minor, Gacy left behind his past jobs of selling shoes and running a KFC and moved to Chicago, where he ended up founding a construction business. And then, of course, we know he frequently dressed up for children's parties as Pogo the Clown and volunteered as the Democratic precinct captain in his area. Many reports of missing boys were made concerning Gacy as a suspect, but police never took them seriously because he was admired and respected in the community. So it wasn't until much later in his killing spree that a class ring from a victim was found by police when they finally investigated Gacy's home. He was arrested in late 1978 and was found guilty on 33 counts of murder, receiving a death sentence. He was finally executed in May of 1994.
And then, once they arrested him, they found the House of Horrors.
Yes.
Underneath his home.
Ugh.
It's terrible. I mean, I've seen some things, investigators talking about, like, investigating that. And once they started digging, and they were just like,
look,
it was
just mentioning it, my nose automatically, it's like I automatically start smelling something that doesn't even exist, like a phantom odor, and it makes me want to throw up.
Those poor, poor victims. I mean, the fact that he lived so long on death row is the worst part of all this.
He had to have help. I mean, I just don't think, yeah.
Well, sometimes you had them digging their own graves.
Yeah, I know.
Or digging graves for other victims.
Yeah, I know, but there's theories that he wasn't like working alone.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true. We have another medical practitioner here. Have you ever heard of Linda Hazard?
Not sure.
Dude, this story is off the chain crazy. I watched a documentary on this years ago. So she had little training and no medical degree, but Linda was certified as a fasting specialist in Washington State, and they started referring to her as Dr. Linda Hazard, even though she has no medical degree. She published a book called Fasting for the Cure of Disease, where she stated that her beliefs of food being the root of all diseases, especially if you eat too much of it. She only allowed her patients to consume small amounts of vegetable broth if they were allowed any sustenance. In 1908, one patient died after fasting for over 50 days in Hazard's care. She targeted wealthy patients, many of which signed over large portions of their estates to her before their deaths.
What the hell?
In August of 1911, Hazard was arrested for first-degree murder for starving a patient named Claire Williamson, a very wealthy patient, by the way, to death. She never took responsibility for starving any of her patients, but a jury found her guilty of manslaughter and sentenced her to 2 years of hard labor in, like, a work camp. While her state medical license was revoked, the governor pardoned her. And in 1920, she built a sanitarium and called it a school for health. It's been estimated that she starved over a dozen people to death. So how does she get pardoned? How is she allowed to continue
Why,
I mean, the whole story is just wild.
Why
So
would-
if you're looking for some true crime to dig into, that is a wild, wild story.
and what part of my treatment do I need to sign over power of attorney to a part of my estate to you, Doc? I don't understand that. I just don't understand how she would talk these people into stuff like that.
I don't know. I need to find a doctor that will make me fast.
Oh, yeah? You
Yeah.
think so?
Yeah, I do. All right, Dylan, we've heard of Fred and Rose West. They lived in Glasgow. He drove Mr. Whippy's ice cream van for a living.
That's not creepy. That's not the least bit creepy.
In November of 1965, Fred West fatally hit a 4-year-old boy with his ice cream truck, which many believed was intentional. He was later chased out of Glasgow by an angry mob of parents, who believed that he intentionally hit the boy and used the ice cream truck to lure children. He ended up moving to Bridgeton, where he carried out his killing spree with his wife, Rose. Between 1967 and 1987, he killed 12 people, including his ex-wife and one of his children.
What a monster.
He was finally arrested in 1994, but took his own life in jail a year later. Rose West was convicted in 1995 of 10 counts of murder and received a life sentence.
What was the name of the ice cream truck? Mr. Creamy?
Mr. Whip. No, not Mr. Creamy. Mr. Whippy.
Mr. Whippy.
Mr. Whippy. Mr. Whippy. Ted Bundy was a suicide hotline volunteer, a grocery store bagger, stalker, and a buster. So while pursuing a degree in psychology, Ted Bundy was employed at Seattle's Crisis Center, taking calls from people in emotional distress. It's believed that this is where Bundy studied how to persuade vulnerable people and learned manipulative reasoning. After an endless back-and-forth chase of being caught and released by the police, Bundy ended up confessing to 30 murders and received 3 life sentences. He was finally executed on January 24th of 1989, but it's estimated that he killed over 100 people between 1974 and 1978.
Damn. Bundy, man, he was a charmer, they said.
Can you imagine, like, hey, yeah, you should come work for our suicide hotline?
Maybe he helped some people. I don't know.
Yeah, I doubt it.
But I bet he really did learn things about people and how to talk to people while doing that job.
Well, I'm sure he did.
Jeez.
Reminds me of one of my favorite Christmas movies, and it's so stupid, but it's hilarious, is Mixed Nuts.
This movie, you love this movie.
I think it's funny. It's like Steve Martin. Love Steve Martin. But he operates a crisis hotline that is in financial crisis. And then there's like a serial killer afoot and just like all these other antics.
Lots of antics.
Lots of antics.
My gosh. So yeah, if you're bored tonight, check out, if you want something serious, Child 44. And if you want something not serious, Mixed Nuts, starring Steve Martin.
Mixed Nuts.
Yeah.
It's great. All right, Dylan, those are a few jobs held by serial killers. We can wrap it up with, I've got one more that I feel like needs to be discussed.
Okay.
And that is Ed Gein. He was a babysitter.
Was he a babysitter?
He was a babysitter.
Who in the hell is going to let Ed Gein watch their kid?
He was actually the basis for the Babysitters Club books.
What?
Yeah. There was that character, Ed.
I'd never read the books.
I'm lying to you.
That's stupid.
Ed Gein supported himself by working as a handyman. So again, low skill, menial labor job, and was a trusted babysitter between the late 1940s and the 1950s. He was said to have entertained children with magic tricks. He told them stories of cannibals and even took them out for ice cream in the summer.
Okay.
They went and got a Mr. Whippy. While most believe that Gein was a serial killer, he was actually only convicted of 2 counts of murder, despite police finding numerous remains from 9 bodies. And he was sent to the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane, and then Mendota State Hospital instead of prison. He ended up dying of cancer while in Mendota State Hospital, and that was in 1984. And here's a fun fact for you. Chris Farley, the comedian, grew up near Mendota State Hospital and heard stories of Ed Gein and was like incredibly afraid growing up that like an Ed Gein would escape and kill him
Oh gosh.
as a child. And Sean Penn was also incarcerated with Richard Ramirez.
Really?
They were in jail, like in the same jail at the same time in the 80s. So there's some fun facts for you.
Sean Penn really was a bad boy.
He's a bad boy. Bad boy for life.
Well, you know, I got to say that, yeah, a lot of people think Ed Gein killed a ton of people, but he didn't.
He was like a grave robber.
He was a grave robber. He, like, messed with people's remains.
Ew.
Yeah.
You gonna let him babysit?
No.
So, I'm just curious who's like, hey, here's this weird guy. We should get him to keep the kids.
Well, you know, it was a different time and a different, you know.
I don't care.
Maybe small town.
I don't care. There's no way I'm going to let a guy who looks like Ed Gein babysit the kids.
All right, Heather, thank you for that departure on the midweek or the sometime this week. I enjoyed that. That was that all makes sense for the most part, right?
You think so?
Those jobs and such. Yeah.
Maybe not the candy.
Well, maybe not owning a candy factory, but
or working in a candy factory.
Yeah.
How can you take something so awesome and then just make it sinister?
Candy, it's bait.
I guess so. You're right.
They could get me with the candy.
I could be lured into a van with the promise of candy.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I have 48 Cadbury cream eggs in here. You should come eat them. I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm climbing up in that van.
You're done.
Sucking the eggs. Yep.
All right. Until next time, stay groovy.
Stay jiggy with it. All right.
Yeah.
Bye, Dylan.
Bye.